So, a very good afternoon to all of you. How are you all? Good. So, what was your what mind was thinking when you saw for the first time while writing mains paper one? Who all have written mains? Okay. So, what did you feel after seeing the paper? But what did you feel after seeing? What was the shift between from the paper one of 2015 to 2016? How did you feel? Okay. Hmm. It was specific. Hmm. Okay. Okay, so you made up an answer for Krishna Dev Rai. Great. Okay. So the first session would be on art and culture questions. See, art and culture is one area specifically for mains. All the students feel that it is not remunerative in the sense it would not bring in that cost and returns, right? What about prelims? How is this area? What all do you read? Do you think for prelims there are different books and for mains there are different books? No? Okay, good. See, one thing we have to be very sure that for culture, we don't have to go optional books. We don't have to. It is a GS paper. Even if they are going too deep in the mains or in the prelims, it would be difficult for everyone, right? And for general studies paper, you have to have a generalistic approach. But one thing again I want to make very clear is when you are doing culture specifically, the areas which are overlapping with your syllabus, this is the broad syllabus of mains. Indian culture would cover the salient aspects of art forms, literature and architecture from ancient to the modern times. So there are three keywords: art forms, literature and architecture, right? So when you're doing it for your prelims or for your mains, you have to go a little bit deeper. That is why they have asked this Krishna Dev Rai. And apart from this, the reason being Vijayanagar Empire. Krishna Dev Rai is a corollary to Vijayanagar Empire, and when you read Vijayanagar Empire, you cannot do away with Krishna Dev Rai, right? And Vijayanagar Empire has been asked in the prelims several times. Getting my point? So they are not going beyond the syllabus. They are in the syllabus, but you have to be very specific about certain things. What we'll be doing is, we'll be analyzing the nature of questions being asked, which will help you in preparing this section, apart from discussing this year papers. In 2013, what I have done is, as per the analysis, what we analyzed, 2013 questions and 16 questions are a little bit similar. Why? If you happen to see the first question, discuss the Tandav dance as recorded in the early Indian scriptures. This question cannot be dealt without having a specific knowledge, right? Same goes with Chola architecture. If you happen to see the first question of 2016, be it Buddhist art or Buddhist Stupa art and Krishna Dev Rai, if you don't have specific knowledge, you cannot attempt it. And even if you're making it an answer, if you're bluffing the examiner, it can fall flat. Why? Because these questions are very specific. Whereas, in the last year or 2014, the nature of questions were a little bit general, like urban planning, Indus Valley civilization, Mesolithic rock cut architecture, although is again specific, but what about Takshila University? So getting my point, 2014 and 15 questions were a bit general. Everyone could attempt, write something on it, whereas in 2013 and 16 they were going a bit specific, and that too of South Indian history. Tandav dance, Chola architecture, Sangam literature, then Krishna Dev Rai. So South Indian history is very important for mains as well as prelims. You may be avoiding it in prelims, but now after seeing the trend, you have to do it. Okay? So shall we discuss the first question? You have any doubts regarding your preparation? Hmm. Hmm. See, hmm. Ancient to modern times includes medieval, right? Ancient to modern times include medieval in the period. Connecting the dots is like this only. If South Indian history or architecture is very prominent in medieval India as well, you cannot do away with it. As I said, Vijayanagar Empire is a hot favorite topic of UPSC even in prelims. So when you're doing it, you cannot avoid reading about Krishna Dev Rai, Tungbhadra Doab, all the struggles. Okay? Those things you read it for your prelims. But what you can do is, I know many of you don't do medieval India for your prelims, right? Last benchers, do you read medieval India? No. Yes? Okay, good then. But I don't think so many of you read medieval India. But even if you have to read it, again focus on the syllabus, art forms, literature and architecture. In this way, you can solve your prelims as well as mains questions, right? That is how you can connect the dots. Okay, so shall we come to the first question? Early Buddhist stupa art, while depicting folk motifs and narratives, successfully expounds Buddhist ideals elucidate. Okay, so who all have written mains? Can anyone tell me what did you answer? Hmm. Hmm. Okay. 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 So you try to answer it broadly. If we happen to see the question, it says early Buddhist stupa art. And if you break the keywords given in the question, then that means the first part should be early Buddhist stupa art. If anyone is not writing Guptas or post-Guptas or Satavahanas, their marks won't be cut. Point number one. So when the question is itself saying early Buddhist art, all these things of post-Guptas and Guptas can become your conclusion, just to give a hint to the examiner that you know how it developed. But the question is specifically on early Buddhist stupa. Second part of the question, folk motifs, narratives, how they expound Buddhist ideals, right? That is how question is broken, right? So now, early Buddhist stupa art, what do you mean by it? When when Buddha was alive or when Buddha died? Okay, see, again, very conceptual clarity that when we speak about early Buddhist art, or the question is dealing with how Buddhist ideals got popularized in the form of art forms and it spread it to Indian subcontinent is what you have to write. And that only started when Buddha died. There is a theory in one of the Buddhist texts, two theories, that after Buddha died, there were 8 parts which were distributed all over India. And then Ashoka, through stupa construction, he expounded or popularized Buddhism to different rulers as well, right? So this is one theory. That is how stupas got built. Now, another question. So when we say stupas were built, do we have to write the construction of stupas? How many of you drew that Harmika, Chhatri, Medika, Torans, Pradakshina path, which is given in your Fine Arts Introduction to Indian Art, NCRT? When I spoke to some of the students, they had done it. I'm not saying that they are wrong. It can impress the examiner, but then you have to then make your content so enriched that you are relating those diagram to match with the Buddhist ideals. How you can do so? When we speak about stupa construction, the relics, where are they kept? Harmika, upar, right? When we say torans or the gateways or the panels, there the narratives or Buddha's stories are inscribed. ठीक है? तो ऐसे you can relate. Other than this, what you can do is that you can specifically break this question into folk motives and narratives. How? When we speak about folk motives, that means you have to explain the Buddhist ideals through symbols. That is how Buddha was revered and worshipped, through his ideal, through his symbols, and not in a human form. Mahayana made Buddha worshipped in human form, but since the question is early Buddhist art, we have to only limit ourselves to folk motives, that is through symbol worship. ठीक है? अब जैसे lotus हो गया, bono, lying, all these things you can write it over here. Then through wheel, there is a wheel, dharma chakra. It signifies 4 noble truths of Buddhism. What are they? 4 noble truths. It's there, it is signified through the dharma chakra or the wheel, which you can see in different stupas like Sachi, Barut, and the later ons which Ashoka made. What does it signify? 4 noble truths. No one has history as their optional. Khair, 4 noble truths, so it's written in NCRT as well. No, that is not 4 noble truths. One is that there is a suffering, there is dukh. The other one is cause of dukh, that is samudaya. End of dukh, that is nirodh. And the mark to end the dukh is marg. Right? So these are the 4 noble truths which are depicted through the construction of dharma chakra. Then you must have read about the lion there on the pillars, ठीक है, stupas में, to decorate. What does it signify? Especially during Ashokan period. There were trees also, there were animals also made. So what do they signify? Lion क्या ही signify करेगा? Royalty, strength, valor. ठीक है? No one should fear from speaking the truth. So all these things you can write. There was a question in 2014. Queen Mara. There was this match the following pair, consider the following pairs. If someone had written or seen the paper, they could have written one narrative at least of Buddhist ideal. So what are the narratives? They are usually depicted through Jataka stories. Jataka stories are nothing but the birth stories of Buddha. ठीक है? वो कहाँ पर होते थे? Stupas में? Torans, gateways. Then there were specific panels on which these narratives were inscribed. और कौन-कौन सी stories थी? Fine arts किसने पढ़ी है? Queen Maya Devi's dream. Yes. Exactly. So there were 2-3 stories के example which this Mahayana also became a new form of religion in Buddhism. ठीक है? But stupas का dominance started declining. His eye caves. So caves, Ajanta caves पे तो जाना ही नहीं है. It's early Buddhist stupa because there the Buddha was revered and worshipped in the human form. ठीक है? That is how you had to write. So exactly. So one technique is, although it's very difficult to say when you are not giving the paper and when you happen to see the question for the first time, that is very easy to break the question. But when you write in the exam conditions, what is coming to your mind, you just write. So be calm, read the question. हो सकता है you don't have to write too much. You only had to limit in this question. So that is how the question only asked you to about early Buddhist stupa art. ठीक है? और elucidate का मतलब क्या होता है? Explain simply. It's better to give examples to explain. ठीक है? इसलिए बरूत, सांची स्तूपा, अमरावती स्तूपा, their names had to be here in this question. Otherwise, your answer would not be enriched. ठीक है? This is some of the key points which we have already discussed. You can download these slides to enrich your content further. Although a question repeat to hoga nahi. And one thing more, I don't want to scare you, but this question was asked in 2013, history optional. Same question. But that does not call for you to see other optional papers. Because this is very well given in your NCERT. All this matter you can get it from your NCERT. But one thing is for sure, that GS ke questions are also being given to the professional or the people who are having those optionals. Okay? That is it. But the questions are not difficult per se. Chalo, we come to the second question. Krishnadev Rai, the king of Vijayanagar, was not only an accomplished scholar himself, but was also a great patron of learning and literature. Discuss. A very factual question. You know it and or you don't know it, right? So, again, the idea is to break the question. How the introduction could be about his rule, about Vijayanagar Empire and his interests. He was not only a scholar, but he was also a supporter of religion. He was very spiritual, not only confined to literature. Then the question is saying not only an accomplished scholar himself, so that means to justify this, you have to mention his works as well. That his works, his own written works. Third part, but was also a great patron of learning and literature. That means you have to, after this, give the names of the poets or the scholars who were there in his court. ठीक है? अब very factual. Books के नाम नहीं पता. अष्टदिग्गज who are they? If you don't know, you cannot attempt this question. So my idea is that if you don't know this question, don't attempt it. You're wasting your time. Don't bluff the examiner. Because if they are being too specific and you are just bluffing it for just to gain 1 mark, he might be frustrated. He might have a negative opinion about you. Okay, so otherwise you can attempt other questions. So this question is very specific. Now, देखो कर तो सकता है. There's no harm, but this question is specifically on literature. See, learning means learning could be then learning different languages which he himself learned. He was a knower of many different languages. But this question, scholar जब आ जाता है ना, so it's usually literature. Don't go into those territories where you are not required to answer. That's what I would say. This question is only about Ashtadiggaj and his works. If you know the 8 court luminaries of his and their work and something about it, then only you can attempt this question. ठीक है? मतलब फालतू में भी what would you gain by showing off your knowledge and deviating from the question? ठीक है? अगर आप इसकी हिंदी भी पढ़ोगे, you will get the inference that it's only about literature. 1 or 2 lines you can add about music. As I said, that can be written in your introduction. That besides being patron of literature, he also learnt various language. He patronized musicians. He himself was having knowledge of music and other things. Okay? Now, very factual question, right? Hmm. 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 Ashtadiggaj. Hmm. Huh. You could have also, if someone was not knowing about Ashtadiggaj, and since the question was discuss, you could have also given in 2-3 lines why Vijayanagar was a center of learning. There might be certain reasons behind it, no? That it was a center of learning. Not every place is a center of learning, right? So what could be the possible reasons? First is the fertile Tungabhadra Doab, then trade, then the personal outlook of the ruler himself, which is Krishna Dev Rai. Okay. These things also you could have written in your introduction just to make examiner feel that you know why Vijayanagar Empire was a center of learning. Okay. Because there were great rulers at many different places, but not every center was a center of learning, right? So these could be also discussed in the initial paragraphs. So nothing, you just have to connect the dots. About Krishna Dev Rai, his reign is important, from which dynasty he belongs to. Tuluk dynasty, 1509 se 1529 he ruled. Then it is also known as the golden period for the Vijayanagar Empire. Then he propagated and he promoted Telugu, Kannada, Sanskrit literature and even Tamil works as well. Okay? So his works, without mentioning Amukta Maryada, examiner को feel नहीं आएगी. That is his most important work. And then Jambavati Kalyan, Rasa Manjari, they are all good works which are very well known in the history optional. Then about his works, then you have to go to those works which he patronized or promoted. Kannada, Sanskrit, all the poets like Mallanarya, ek example you have to give. So I feel that this is a very difficult question. Many people have left this question. It's better to leave it. Then you have to mention the Ashtadiggaj. Tenali Raman stories you might have heard, right? So he was one of the Ashtadiggaj in his court. So Ashtadiggaj ka concept, what was it? That in the Vaishnavite tradition, it was believed that the whole space or the universe is being held by the 8 elephants. Elephant, right? The way they are holding the space, the 8 luminaries in his court held his court. So that is how the concept came from as Ashtadiggaj. So they were the most important poets, scholars of his court. You have to mention them. At least 1 or 2 you have to mention. जैसे तेनाली रामन याद होना चाहिए. Then Alasani Pedana, he is the father of Telugu poetry. ठीक है, तो ये होना पता होना चाहिए. That is it. So your see, discuss does not always require a conclusion. You only have to fill the content. Otherwise also, when you say that let's discuss this topic, do you usually always arrive at a conclusion? No, na. When you say chalo aaj ye topic discuss karte hain, do you always arrive at a conclusion? No, you may or you may not. So it's like that. You have to explain, you have to put your points, that is it. Right? Any other specific question with respect to preparation of culture? See, whatever the trend is, it's very dynamic. Dynamic how? 1 year they ask you very factual question. एक ही period से many questions. Like in 2013, as we saw, that mostly South Indian history was asked. Then when we go to 2014 and 15, we happen to see questions which are very relatable, like Indus Valley Civilization, Takshila, Nalanda, all these type of questions where everyone can write something. Then in 2016, again, very specific questions. So my take would be that be prepared in a sense that it is helping you in prelims and mains both. So literature, art and architecture are 3 main areas where you have to focus. Don't leave medieval Indian history wholly, because they have asked in mains as well Sufi and Bhakti movement. So you don't have to prepare that topic only for your prelims. I feel that many of you do from medieval Indian history very selected chapters. Like some people only do Bhakti movement, some people only do Mughals. Okay? So, and they had asked Battle of Panipat as well in your mains. So they can go specific, but the idea is to remain in the boundaries of the syllabus, that is art, literature and architecture. Do it nicely from your NCERT books, that's more than sufficient. And if the question is difficult, it will be for all, so don't worry. It's a general studies paper. If many of you are reading only one source or two sources, everyone is reading that. You don't have to worry about one or two questions then. ठीक है, जैसे इस बार allelopathy था. So there are very specific questions in paper 3 allelopathy. Hear this. If someone knows it, then only one can answer. McBride Commission in paper 2, yes. So har ek paper mein they had given very specific question where you have to leave that question. So leave that question because they are very typical questions. Yeah, they want you to be very honest. So when you are showing your conduct in the interview that you are honest, while attempting the paper also you have to be very honest. It's not that your honesty is judged only by answering the questions in the form of speaking. In the written form also you have to show that honesty. So your personality is being checked at every stage, right? So be honest, be true to yourself. Don't make or to show the examiner that I know and you are only writing stories. Don't do that. Okay? Chalo, all the best. हाँ, email ID. Okay. Chalo, now the next session is on society, right?
A very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Smriti Shah. I'm a faculty of Indian Society and Post-Independence India with Vision IS. So that's quite obvious that I'm going to take up session on post-independence and society with you. So in total, there are 6 questions, 1 question from post-independence and 5 questions from Indian society. Just one thing, how many of you have written mains? Arey, good enough, yeah, and that's quite a good enough. Chalo, I'll say that how many of you are expecting to write mains next year? That's a better question, I guess. No, there are some who are not even raising hand now. That's commendable. Bhai, Panchvarshiya Yojana nahi hai. You have to write your mains in 2017. That has to be your target. Chalo, good enough. Let's start with the first question. That's question number 6. That's question number 6 for all of you. Has the formation of linguistic states strengthened the cause of Indian unity? First and foremost thing, there is a difference when you are answering a question from a particular section. For example, if you've seen this year's paper, or papers I must say, there are common questions which have been asked. For example, women empowerment in paper 3. You know, the kind of questions that they have been asking, impact on globalization on informal sector in paper 3. So there is interdisciplinary approach, which is the need of the hour. But at the same time, you have to be very clear with respect to one thing, and that is, the moment you are answering a question from a particular section, then it has to be written in a certain expected norms. For example, if there is any question from post-independence India, the first thing that you need to make sure is the chronology is must. It's your post-independence India, it's your history. So chronology. No matter if you've written 5 odd points, but they are not in a chronological order, you would not fetch good marks. Now, with respect to every answer, there are 2 things. One is the content, and second is the context. just remember one thing. There is lot of discrepancy with respect to the content. It cannot be possible that all of you are writing a good content at the same time, because there is lot of subjectivity. Even the person who's correcting the script might not agree with your content. So with respect to content, you might afford to go wrong, but with respect to the context, you cannot afford to go wrong, because context will remain the same for each one of you present here. The content can vary basis on your resources, whatever sources, whatever coaching institute, whatever material you are referring to, but context can never change, because that is the demand with which UPSC has asked that particular question. Is that very clear for all of you? Chalo, let's start. Has the formation of linguistic states strengthened the cause of Indian unity? So first and foremost thing, let me discuss the question and then very briefly how you're supposed to prepare for the next year. So the first and foremost thing, what led to emergence of linguistic reorganization of states? That has to be your introduction. The second, to what extent it has contributed to or strengthened Indian unity. And third is the counter argument plus overall conclusion. No matter how much is the marks weightage of a question, introduction and conclusion is mandatory, because it gives a proper structure to your answer. So the first thing is, what led to the emergence of linguistic reorganization of state? Let me just very briefly discuss the content, and then we'll discuss what should be written in the answer. So any idea? Those who have written, yes? Okay, Patti Sriramalu, who basically sat on fast onto that, and then finally he succumbed to it. Okay, anything else? JVP committee and Dhar committee. Okay, what else? Linguistic reorganization of the provinces. But you did not hit the bullseye. The question was, what led to the emergence? What was the basic understanding and not the incidences? So the first and foremost, yes, of course. Official language, no, that's a different issue altogether. First and foremost thing, language is the most crucial aspect of your culture. First. Second, if you want, the aim is to ensure massive education and literacy. It can be only possible if it is given by medium of mother tongue. And third, democracy can be real only if administration and politics is carried out in a language which is commonly understood by all. And that is possible only and only when you reorganize your states on the basis of linguistic identities. That was the reason what led to the emergence of linguistic reorganization of state. The irony is that at the time of independence, in fact prior to independence, the leadership was quite okay with the fact that yes, you need to reorganize your states on linguistic lines. But the problem is, at the time of independence, the circumstances were such that we could not afford linguistic reorganization, because there was a fear that already your economy, your polity, your administration is completely dislocated, and any effort of linguistically reorganizing might lead to balkanization of Indian Union. And that was the reason they were not very okay with the fact. But due to the demand which was created, and as many of you said, SK Dar Commission, JVP Commission, and finally, State Reorganization Commission was set up, which is also commonly known as Fazl Ali Commission, which led to linguistic reorganization of the state. So this has to be your introductory and sub-introductory paragraph. Then very briefly, in the next, the body of the content, you will be mentioning that how it contributed to strengthening of the Indian unity. Is language such a significant component? How? It removes barriers. What else? Can I say that language is not only the part of your culture, but also your livelihood? What? Okay, you're accepted in the society, but the most important thing, your access to the education, your access to the government jobs, your access to the economic development. Somewhere deep down the line, all of this is very strongly governed by linguistic criteria. So by reorganizing states on the linguistic criteria, we have actually strengthened the Indian unity. As very rightly said by a very known political scientist, you all must have heard Rajni Kothari. Okay? Rajni Kothari said that linguistic by the way, this Rajni Kothari is a man. Never say that she said. So, Rajni Kothari has very rightly said that linguistic reorganization of state is nothing but functional. Because first of all, it released or it kind of liberated the most important source of discord which was existing in the society, and secondly, it led to the creation of homogeneous units which can easily be administered in the medium which is commonly understood by all. But then most important criteria is the counter argument, which says कि इतना भी आसान नहीं था और नहीं है. Reason है, linguistically India is so diverse that you cannot create every state based on a language. How many languages are there? There are 125 major languages with 1652 dialects, to be very precise. That's the status or the amount of diversity which is existing in the society. So how do you expect to reorganize every state on a linguistic criteria? As a result, when the reorganization took place, there were communities which did not speak the official language. So there was a fear that their culture, their livelihood will be suppressed. And there was a fear that it might further lead to parochialism or the politics of sub-regionalism. For example, the demand for Bhojpur, the demand for Mithila, which is emerging in context of Bihar. It is on the pretext of different dialects. So this is very important that you need to realize that linguistic reorganization, yes, in the initial 2 decades of independence was definitely a source of Indian unity, but it cannot be a source of Indian unity in long run. Because ultimately everything boils down to one fact, and that is economic development. You can relate your culture also to economic development. Is that very clear? Any doubt with respect to this? So overall, your conclusion will be that yes, linguistic reorganization contributed or strengthened Indian unity, but it was only in initial 2 decades after the independence. Post that, the major bone of discontent has been the economic development, and which needs to be adequately addressed. Is that very clear? Okay? So what is the basic minimum which needs to be written is the background which led to linguistic emergence, how it contributed to the unity, and finally the counter argument with 1-line conclusion that needs to be written. Is everyone clear with this? Any doubt? Counter argument क्यों important है? I'll tell that. Because the question says, has the formation with a question mark. So you definitely cannot leave any question one-sided. It has to have a balanced opinion to it, so that it gives an impression that you are aware of the comprehensive dimension. कोई भी policy होती है यार, उसका हम ये करते हैं. What is this? Strength, weakness, opportunity and threat. So one of the threat is that reorganizing of states on primordial identities might further lead to parochial interest. Huh. Huh. That's okay. Huh. Huh. Okay, with respect to that, Bipin Chandra only, they have written that linguistic reorganization did not solve all the regional problems. There were further many problems which were being witnessed in the current scenario, like inter-river water disputes, the relative deprivation within a particular region. So there has been many broader issues. Language was just the part in the initial years. Post 1967, तो linguistic reorganization की कोई बात भी नहीं करता है. Is that very clear? The last thing was 1967. Why did I say that? Some sir mentioned about official language issue. So the official language issue, the amendment was passed in 1967, which made English the official associate language. So with that, the problem of language as a bone of discontent was completely resolved. Post that, it was only the economic problem. Is that very clear? ठीक है? हाँ जी. हाँ. बिल्कुल, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, पता है कभी नोटिस करना, एक लास्ट क्वेश्चन है रीजनलिज्म पे. मैं जब वो डिस्कस करूंगी, I'll take up this again, that हम बात लैंग्वेज की करते हैं, कास्ट की करते हैं, रिलीजन की करते हैं, but everything is all about economic development. We'll discuss that in the last question. चलो, let's take up the next question. हाँ हाँ, बिल्कुल. Absolutely. Absolutely, it is a very strong part of your culture and customs. It also helps for cognitive development of an individual personality. Huh? Okay, meet me after the class. I'll tell you that Punjab and Haryana was presented in linguistic garb, but it had religious overtones to it. Huh? That is on development criteria and not linguistic criteria. Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh is on development criteria, not linguistic criteria. There are lot many criteria. Let me come to that last question of regionalism. We'll take that up. Gujarat and Maharashtra on linguistic lines, yes, it is there. That was to there on linguistic lines only. Ye to state okay, guys, there are few things which I expect from the class, because that's a discussion on the question, and I'm not delving into the history. Otherwise, this lecture will never come to an end. So that's your homework. That State Reorganization Commission, when gave the report in 1956, there were 14 states and 6 union territories, but there were 3 which were not divided. One was Gujarat, Maharashtra, and second was Punjab, Haryana, which took place later. 1960 में Gujarat and Maharashtra, और 1966 में Punjab and Haryana, with certain areas going to Himachal. This I am expecting from you guys. Okay, so I'm not delving into that detailing. Chalo, next उठाओ. The question number 8. Yes, I wanted to talk about this question. To what extent globalization has influenced the core of cultural diversity in India? Explain. What have you written? Those who have written mains. कुछ नहीं लिखा. अच्छा, जिसने नहीं भी लिखा हो दिमाग दौड़ा लो. Globalization everybody knows. ठीक है? Globalization क्या होता है? अच्छा, एक चीज यार देखो, बहुत बोर हो जाओगे अगर ऐसे मुझे देखते रहोगे और मैं आपको देखकर बोलती रहूंगी, और सोसाइटी में कोई फायदा नहीं है, क्योंकि कोई एक ऐसी बुक नहीं है जहां पे यू विल गेट ऑल द मटीरियल. सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट लर्न द आर्ट ऑफ ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग. ज्यादा से ज्यादा क्या होगा, थलुआ पॉइंट बोलोगे, और ज्यादा से ज्यादा ये होगा बगल वाला मजाक बनाएगा, उससे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं होगा. एट द एंड ऑफ इट यू विल ओनली बी बेनिफिटेड. सो प्लीज टेल मी व्हाट इज ग्लोबलाइजेशन. ठीक है, ठीक है. ठीक है. हाँ. ठीक है? Okay, good enough. See, I'll tell you something. Since you're preparing for next year, please do one thing. Whenever you see a question, prepare a rough framework. Do not immediately jump on writing the answer. So see, in this question, it says, to what extent globalization has impacted core of cultural diversity? This is the question. Okay? What do you understand by globalization? Exchange of goods and services, free flow of goods and services, or if you want to write a very good definition, authentic definition, globalization refers to a process by which the national and the regional economies, societies and cultures get integrated through global network of trade, commerce, transportation and immigration. So that is what do you mean by globalization. Now what is culture? What is culture? Way of life. As simple as that. What constitutes culture? Language, customs, beliefs, dressing, rituals, dance forms, architecture, everything. So basically, culture is a complex whole. A very important work has been done by E.B. Tyler, who says that culture refers to knowledge, beliefs, ideology, customs that an individual acquire because of the membership of that particular society. Is that very clear? Now, many of you have written the impact of globalization on culture. But the question is not impact of globalization on culture. The impact says on cultural diversity. So, can I say linguistic diversity? What or? और क्या आएगा? Traditions. Anything else? Festivals or dressing pattern or religion, food habits. See, again, it's not culture, it's cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, ethnic diversity, cosmoculture. Again, it's cultural diversity. You will mention that point, but within a different setup. That is what I'm trying to tell you. Please understand the demand of the question. It's not saying impact on the culture. It says impact on the cultural diversity. So first tell what kind of diversities exist in context of India. Linguistic diversity, religious diversity, ethnic diversity, caste diversity. You can also say racial diversity. We can also say can I say marriages, ideology? Ideology, I would want to connect under religion, because it's mostly the different religions which governs your ideology. Now, yes, marriage can also be included under religion. For example, according to Hinduism, marriage is a sacred institution, whereas according to Islam, it is a contract, which can be diluted. That's the result. But in the garb of globalization, there is uniformity, which is emerging, where the ritual aspect of marriage is declining and the secular dimension is emerging. Is that very clear? Now let's take up each and every point. Somebody talked about homogenization. So whenever you are studying the impact of globalization, it is with respect to 3 dimensions. One is, second is, can I say this? Make sense? Homogenization, hybridization, and revival of local culture. Make sense? Okay? Now try to link them in these points. See, it is not possible for you to write all these points. So most important is pick any 4 odd characteristic which you will discuss, and discuss it from these 3 perspectives. Is that very clear? लिख दो. For example, let's start with food habits. The first impact of globalization on your food habit is McDonaldization of food habits. It's a term. Okay, by the way, it's Coca-Colism, Pepsi culture. By the way, McDonaldization of food habit is a sociological jargon which is being given by a theorist known as George Ritzer. So you can use this terminology known as McDonaldization of food habit. That is fast food culture which is emerging. But at the same time, what is the example of hybridization? McDonald's not selling beef products. Okay, ठीक है, बिल्कुल. This time तो McDonald's going vegetarian during Navratris to promote their market. Domino's, अच्छा चलो Domino's. ठीक है? So ये example होता है hybridization का. And what is revival of local culture? The culture of local cuisines, which is emerging. In fact, in the various multinational corporations, you can see that the different cuisines are emerging. So that is the revival of local culture which is happening. Is that very clear? Then next, with respect to cinema, why did we forget cinema? That is the entertainment industry. Everyone is fond of Hollywood movies. But then Hollywood is very smart. They know how to cater the market. I never knew that ये जो movie नहीं आई थी dinosaur वाली, it got released in Bhojpuri also. No, that's a fact. It got released in Bhojpuri also. So that is the power of regional cinema that we have, that the movies are getting dubbed into even regional languages. So that is the example of hybridization. Growing influence of Hollywood cinema will be homogenization. Their dubbing into regional languages or Hindi will be example of hybridization and revival of local cinema. आजकल हमारा सिनेमा भी बाहर देखा जाता है, ठीक है? प्रियंका चोपड़ा becoming Quantico, global icon that people are looking for the local peoples, ठीक है? So this is how you have to arrange your content. Most importantly, linguistic diversity. English has led to the homogenization of language, but there is a concept of Hinglish which is emerging. होता है ना, आधी पर्दी हिंदी आधी पर्दी इंग्लिश, पूरे इंडिया में काम चला सकते हो. So that is hybridization. And third is that the government has recently launched a scheme for protecting or preserving the endangered languages. And that is the example of revival of local culture. Make sense? वैसे religious diversity उठा लो. आजकल तो secularization of religion हो गया है. आजकल religion का क्या purpose रह गया है बताओ? Social mobilization, ज्यादा से ज्यादा marriage. इंटरकास्ट आजकल होने लग गई है तो माँ बाप को थोड़ा रिलीफ मिलता है, चलो इंटरकास्ट कर लेना, इंटर रिलीजन मत करना, थोड़ी तुम्हारी थोड़ी हमारी. सो आजकल ये हो रहा है ना. सो बहुत सिंपल है. खैर, जोक्स अपार्ट, इट्स सेक्युलराइजेशन ऑफ रिलीजन हैपनिंग. मतलब रिलीजन का सिग्निफिकेंस इज गेटिंग diluted. Now everywhere you are governed by secular aspects and not ritual or religious aspects. But ऐसा नहीं है. Somewhere deep down the line, hybridization is happening. है ना? That we are resorting to, for example, सबसे important, कार खरीदी किसी ने अभी recently? बाइक ही खरीदी हो? खरीदी? कुछ नींबू मिर्ची टांगी? ऐसे जीभ बाहर नहीं निकालो, टांगी ना? नारियल फोड़ा, आरती करी, है ना? तो we are making use of technology, we are developing scientific temper, but at the same time that ritual hold is still existing. कभी कभी क्या होता है ना, जॉन्डिस नहीं उतरता तो डॉक्टर के साथ बाबा के पास भी जाते हैं ना झाड़ फूक के लिए. जब 2 बार 3 बार में यूपीएससी नहीं क्लियर होता तो पंडित के पास जाते हैं ना कुंडली दिखाने के लिए, फिर शनि दशा वगैरह सब आ जाती है. सो दैट इज हाइब्रिडाइजेशन. यू आर अडॉप्टिंग टू सेक्युलर एस्पेक्ट, यू आर अडॉप्टिंग टू मॉडर्निटी, बट एट द सेम टाइम रिवाइवल ऑफ लोकल कल्चर ऑल्सो हैपनिंग. एंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली religious fundamentalism. It is the example of revival of local culture. Because there is a fear that because of globalization, your religion has become so diluted that you need to preserve that identity, and for which people are practicing religious fundamentalism. Is that very clear with respect to this? Chalo. Hanji. हाँ. तो चलो सबसे पहली एक चीज बहुत बेसिक, आपका सिलेबस कहता है इंपैक्ट ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन ऑन इंडियन सोसाइटी. इट डज नॉट से एनीथिंग एल्स. सोसाइटी हैज टू कंपोनेंट्स. तुम लोग तो यार आज सोसाइटी पढ़वा दोगे. Society has two components to it, structure and culture. What do you mean by structure is institution. जैसे आपका family, education, everything fall under that institution. So when we are talking about cultural diversity, I'm not talking marriage as an institution. I'm talking as an ideology on which the marriage as an institution is based. So that's the difference between structure and a culture, of which you have a group of people where you will mention about women, tribes, informal sector. But that's not the demand of the question. Question says cultural diversity. Diversity with respect to food habits, diversity with respect to festivals, diversity with respect to dressing pattern. आज कौन अपने ट्रेडिशनल, हर सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट इम्पैक्ट आजकल अगर आप ट्राइब्स वगैरह पे देखो, ट्राइब्स का एक अपना कल्चर होता है हर ट्राइब्स का, बट बिकॉज उनका डिस्प्लेसमेंट हो रहा है, बिकॉज ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन, इकोनॉमी ग्रो कर रही है, उनका डिस्प्लेसमेंट हो रहा है, दे आर माइग्रेटिंग. As a result, they are coming in contact with the mainstream society. So their culture is getting homogenized. In fact, इसका एक example देती हूँ. According to a recent survey, the sex ratio in tribes has declined. And one of the reason is that because the tribes are coming in contact with the mainstream society, they are adopting patriarchal culture, because of which the child sex ratio within tribes is significantly declining. So that's the impact. That is how you have to write. इनफैक्ट अगर विमेन लिखना था तो पेट्रियार्की के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लिखते कि विमेन का स्टेटस इंप्रूव हो रहा है, दैट इज होमोजेनाइजेशन, बट एट द सेम टाइम पेट्रियार्की इज बीन रिप्लेस्ड फ्रॉम द प्राइवेट स्फीयर टू द पब्लिक स्फीयर. नाउ विमेन इज अलाउड टू वर्क, बट एट द सेम टाइम शी हैज टू टेक केयर ऑफ द हाउस होल्ड कोर्स, डुअल बर्डन, पिंक कॉलर्ड जॉब्स, ग्लास सीलिंग, एवरीथिंग कैन बी रिटन. लिखने का तरीका बदल जाएगा. So the question will not be women, the question will be patriarchy, because that becomes aspect of your culture. Is that very clear? ये clear है सबको? Can we move to the next question? ठीक है, चलो. देखो, जो conclusion होगा उसमें बहुत, हाँ चलो I deviated. जो conclusion होगा उसमें हमेशा एक चीज याद रखना, since core पूछा गया है, हर एक culture के ना दो parts होते हैं, एक core और एक पेरिफेरी. आप नोटिस करना that with the emergence of globalization, the peripheral aspect is undergoing a change, but the core values are still remaining intact. Caste now is not the basis of occupational division of labor, but caste still remains a very important component of marriages. Marriage endogamy is still practiced with respect to the caste. अपने आप को मत जोड़ना. एक सर्वे स्टडी करी गई थी अकॉर्डिंग टू विच इंटरकास्ट मैरिजेस इज हाईली 2% इन इंडिया. सो दैट बिकम्स दैट द कोर ऑफ कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी हैज नॉट बीन वेरी सिग्निफिकेंटली इम्पैक्ट. होमोजेनाइजेशन हैज टेकन प्लेस बट ओनली एट द पेरिफेरल लेवल एंड नॉट एट द कोर लेवल. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? एब्सोल्युटली प्रिजर्व्ड है, बिल्कुल भी नहीं. If you want, see, it's not about that you don't have to. It all depends upon that how you are presenting your content. As he also said, that in urban areas it is more or less homogenization, but in the rural areas it is hybridization. But that also is a very superfluous statement, because mostly the rural people are migrating to the urban areas, and the new lifestyle, new value system through radio, through television is going to rural areas. As rural areas वाले भी तो smartphone use करते हैं ना. So globalization is making an impact on their culture. So that will be a very superfluous assumption. और पहली बात 12.5 नंबर में इतना समय नहीं होगा कि इतनी सारी चीजें आप लिख सको. तो broadly characterize into these whatever points you have content on, mention that. But the most important thing is homogenization, hybridization and revival of local culture. Is that clear? आप corporate culture का भी example डाल सकते हो, आप consumerism का भी example डाल सकते हो, आप वॉल्मटाइजेशन का भी एग्जाम्पल डाल सकते हो. देयर आर एन नंबर ऑफ एग्जाम्पल्स. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट, एन एसेंशियल कंडीशन to eradicate poverty is to liberate the poor from the process of deprivation. Substantiate this statement with suitable examples. या यूपीएससी बहुत अच्छा है, वो आपसे जो भी उम्मीद करता है ना वो लिख कर दे देता है, क्योंकि उसे पता है आप करोगे नहीं. उसने क्लियरली लिख दिया है कि एक स्टेटमेंट है एंड उसको आपको सब्सटैंशिएट करना है, और उसने क्लियरली लिखा है 7 + 5.5. मतलब एक्सप्लेनेशन ऑफ द स्टेटमेंट विल बी 7 marks का एंड सब्सटैंशिएटिंग बाय एग्जांपल विल बी ऑफ 5.5 marks. मींस यू हैव टू राइट बोथ द थिंग्स. अगर वो नहीं लिखता तो जो समझ में आता वो हम लिखकर आ जाते. तो उन्होंने बहुत क्लियरली पूछ लिया है कि दिस इज व्हाट आई एम एक्सपेक्टिंग फ्रॉम यू, प्लीज राइट. सो नाउ टेल मी व्हाट हैव यू अंडरस्टूड फ्रॉम द स्टेटमेंट. जल्दी करो. An essential condition to eradicate poverty is to liberate the poor from the process of deprivation. It's an English statement. What do you understand by this? Normal English है यार, कोई लेना देना नहीं है poverty से. हाँ हाँ हाँ. Absolutely, very brilliant. The thing is that in this question you have to establish the vicious cycle of poverty. That how at certain, first of all, define poverty. That poverty not only refers to lowness of income, but also deprivation of basic capabilities. That's a definition given by Amartya Sen. Basically, this question has two aspects to it. One, it says that poverty estimates, which we are making very objectively on the basis of calorie consumption or on the basis of monthly expenditure, is a very superfluous estimate. What needs to be understood is that poverty is not only about income and expenditure, it is all about access to resources. And what do you mean by access to resources? Everything. Social, political, economical. So you have to link the concept of poverty with deprivation. That a person who is impoverished is most likely to be socially deprived, politically deprived, and economically deprived. And when a person is deprived, then the incidences of poverty is very high. So if you want to eradicate poverty, you need to address the deprivations. ये सबसे आसान तरीका है. What are the social deprivations in India? Education. What else? Health. What else? Caste. अरे brilliant यार, ये तो class intelligent है. Education, health, caste, religion हो सकता है. Social deprivation. याद आया कुछ? सच्चर कमिटी रिपोर्ट. Gender. Very good. These are the social deprivations, more or less. What are the political deprivations? Reservation, that's a deprivation. Okay, for others. नहीं. Reservation नहीं लिखेंगे इसमें. That's not political deprivation, to be very honest. हाँ. See, it all depends how you are interpreting the question, because nowhere in society they have nowhere mentioned that from which report you have to answer or which scholars you have to address to. It all depends upon your interpretation of the question. If you have interpreted it in certain other way and you are able to justify your answer, you're more than welcome to do that. So it all depends upon the interpretation, because nowhere there it is mentioned that it is referring to a particular report. For example, आपके ऐसे का पहला टॉपिक था something engendered and endangered. There is a question mark on the English understanding of engendered. है ना? That's a statement. But that's a clear-cut statement from the Human Development Report, from where they have picked it. And that is in context of gender only. So the problem is, जिसको वो report नहीं पता थी, वो आज भी engender, leading to और with respect to gender की debate में फंसा हुआ है. So उसके लिए UPSC ने बोल दिया है that every kind of interpretation will be accepted. So same goes for this question. So it all depends upon that to what extent you are interpreting. Is that very clear? ठीक है? So first and foremost, poverty is not only a income concept, it is a much more broadened concept or a multi dimensional concept, and we can link it to social exclusion also. Now here you can make use of different interpretation. For example, you can also talk about multi-dimensional poverty index. Has everybody heard of multi-dimensional poverty index? HDI के साथ 2010 से publish हो रहा है. What are the dimensions and indicators? Any idea? Standard of living, health and education, and within which there are multiple indicators. For example, उनके लिए standard of living है sanitation, electricity, cooking fuel, floor, whether it is kacha or pakka, the assets that you have ownership, and the safe drinking water. So there are multiple indicators. So the need of the question was to understand that poverty is not only an income concept, it is a multi-dimensional, multifaceted concept, which is very closely related to social deprivation, political deprivation, and economic deprivation. What I mean by political deprivation is that most of the poor belong to migrant category, and migrants do not have voting rights. So they are politically deprived. And second most important thing, when you are not economically sound, you do not have bargaining power. So now your politics is not governed by policy making or something. It is all appeasement. Access to law, absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely, that can also be a reason. So there are multiple reasons. Then comes the economic deprivation, which is the most obvious interpretation of poverty. And at the same time, who are the people who are most deprived? For example, women, disabled, poor, transgenders, because they are either of the deprivation, and the propensity to be impoverished is more among this deprived section. Is that very clear? So in order to eradicate poverty, you need to eradicate deprivations. And what has government done? That will be your conclusion. What has government done to eradicate deprivations? These multiple deprivations. There has been different schemes. Right to education. Then Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Stand Up India. नया नया बोलो यार. Stand Up India और Skill India. Gender budgeting. नरेगा और बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ. There has been various schemes which has been launched to address the deprivations. क्या? Acha, okay. Accessibility India campaign for the disabled population. Transgender, given the third gender status which has been given to them. So basically, when you are talking about poverty and deprivation with respect to poverty, then you have to be very thorough about few things. That poverty, first of all, is not an economic concept only. It is a social and a multi-dimensional concept. Then you will be talking about other aspects. For example, decent livelihood. Decent living. Slum proliferation भी तो इसी का example होगा ना. One of the deprivation is you do not have access to decent living, decent housing, for which Smart City Mission has been launched, which talks about slum redevelopment also. So this is all which needs to be written. Now it depends upon you to what extent you are writing the answer. There is a very much or large difference between other areas and society, because society can go to any extent. You need to streamline the content. Is that very clear? So what will be your introduction? Definition of poverty. The body relating poverty to the different forms of deprivation. And last conclusion will be the effort of the government to address those deprivation so as to eradicate poverty. For example, Kudumshri model of Kerala. The purpose was women empowerment, but through that they were alleviating poverty. So that can also be an example now. So these are the examples that you have to mention as your concluding remark. Clear hai? Any doubt? ठीक है? चलो. Political terms. अच्छा. Suppose karo there is someone who has come to fight the election, a candidate. Now you will ever be interested that what is the policy of the candidate if he'll ask you that he'll give you 5,000 rupees to vote for him. Poor people who is just not able to sustain a normal living is not in a situation to bargain. That is why Gandhi has said, Mahatma Gandhi, that poverty is the worst form of violence. Because of poverty, you are multi-level पे deprived. So if you want to address poverty, it will not only be on the basis of calorie consumption or monthly expenditure. क्योंकि 12th 5-year plan ने एक statement दिया था कि ऐसा भी हो सकता है एक दिन आएगा कि जब poverty estimate below poverty line will be 0. हम इसी फिराक में है ना? Already Tendulkar report is saying that only 21.9% people are poor in India. So they say that there will be a possibility that there will be 0 people below the poverty line. But then also poverty will remain a challenge because neither you are able to provide education, nor health, nor housing, nor sanitation, nor safe drinking water, nor nourishment. So basically overall leading to their social exclusion. Is that very clear? We are dealing poverty related to deprivation. Disparity नहीं, deprivation. There is a difference. Disparity मतलब when you compare. Deprivation is in the sector where you are deprived. Social deprivation, political deprivation, economic deprivation. हाँ जी. हाँ. हाँ. Absolutely. That is also one of the ways that you can start with questioning that poverty has always been viewed from an objective dimension, not looking into the subjectivity of the poverty. And that is why we are failing. Poverty alleviation program in India is existing since ages, but we are not able to address that because we are not able to understand that it is related to multiple level of deprivations. So by having a one-sided approach, you can never address the menace of poverty. It has to be addressed at multiple levels. Is that clear? Chalo. Next question. That's an easy question. Why are tribals referred to scheduled tribes in India? ये UPSC ने इसीलिए पूछा. जो स्माइल आई है ना हम लोग के चेहरे पे वो इसीलिए आई है. शेड्यूल का शेड्यूल ट्राइब, शेड्यूल का शेड्यूल ट्राइब. तो उन्होंने सिंपली पूछ लिया हम इसे शेड्यूल ट्राइब क्यों बोलते हैं? हाँ. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very nicely said that in the pre-independence era with the Government of India Act 1935, इससे पहले ये कास्ट, ट्राइब्स, इन सबको हम डिप्रेस्ड क्लासेस कहा करते थे. तो उन्होंने क्या किया कि गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट 1935 में उन्होंने लीगल रिकॉग्निशन दे दिया इन लिस्ट और शेड्यूल्स ऑफ ट्राइब्स को, so as to making them entitled to special treatment by the government. And this trait or tendency has been continued in the post-independence period also. So in post-independence period, you can say that scheduled tribes has for the first time emerged in your constitution under Article 366 and 342. 366 says that the tribe is referred as scheduled tribes, or you can say that scheduled tribes is defined as all the tribes or the tribal communities or the part of or the group within tribes or tribal communities which under Article 342 is referred as scheduled tribe for the purpose of this constitution. ये आप किसी भी book में जाके या online भी जाके search कर लीजिएगा, scheduled tribe की definition is there. So Article 366 along with Article 342 talks about the definition of scheduled tribes. Is that very clear? इसे schedule इसलिए कहा जाता है क्योंकि एक list prepare की जाती है that who will come under that category. So एक act है आपके constitution में 342 and 366 which talks about the definition, but there is an attached schedule where the parliament and the president had that discretion that they can add or remove any of the tribe from that particular list. And I'll tell you a reason why it is so. Because there is no unanimity with respect to the definition of tribes. So over the period it has evolved that who all constitute tribe. For example, distinct culture. For example, backwardness. For example, geographical isolation. For example, shyness of contact with the mainstream society. So there has been multiple understanding of what constitutes a tribe. So the legal recognition which was given to the list or the schedule of the tribes during Government of India Act 1935 for the purpose of special treatment has been continued in the post-independence period. And this has led to knowing tribes as the scheduled tribes under Article 366 and 342 of the Constitution. No. Okay, I'll again say this. Since the question has been asked in paper 1, the constitutional provisions, the statutory conventions are not mandatory. But if the not mandatory, मतलब लिखोगे तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, लेकिन नहीं लिखोगे तो ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई बहुत मेजर ब्लंडर कर दिया. लेकिन यही क्वेश्चन अगर पेपर 2 में होता तो it would have been a blunder. That is how you distinguish between answer writing in paper 1 and answer writing in paper 2. Is that very clear? ठीक है? Next is says, indicate the major provisions enshrined in the Constitution of India for their upliftment. What are the major provisions for tribes? National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, or Article 46, or Lok Sabha and all. I was thinking that since it's a simple question, let's make it better structured question or structured answer. So I was thinking that with respect to provisions, let's divide the provisions. For example, the first is definition, second is educational, employment or economic safeguards, third can be political safeguards, and fourth can be the agency to monitor the safeguards available. And then we can divide. For example, definition, Article 366 and 342. It says constitutional provisions. Now it is mandatory for you to write articles. Is that very clear? Now, with respect to education, employment, economic safety, Article 15, 4. Article 16, 4. Somebody said about Article 46. Then Article 19, freedom of movement. There is a reasonable restriction with respect to the scheduled areas. This can also be written. Then political safeguards. Article 330, reservation. Article 332 talks about in legislative assemblies. 243D, reservation in panchayat. You have to write now because it is saying constitutional provisions. 5th schedule, 6th schedule, under which article? Article 244. जिनको नहीं आता सब याद हो जाएगा. पॉलिटी इतना घोट घोट के करोगे क्योंकि एक वही ऐसा सब्जेक्ट है जो समझ में आता है और समझ में आने के बाद कुछ लिखा जाता है. So that is one topic I can guarantee that will be the most interesting topic for most of you. And finally, it is Article 338A, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. हो सकता है आर्टिकल एक बार क्रॉस चेक कर लेना. थैंक यू यार, मतलब ठीक है. तो ये सारे हैं. तो दिस इज हाउ यू कैन मेंशन द आंसर. व्हाट इफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन वाला टर्म नहीं होता तो पेसा, फॉरेस्ट राइट एक्ट, ये सब कुछ भी लिखते, ट्राइबल सब प्लान्स ये सब भी लिखते. बट क्योंकि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजंस है तो हम ये एक्ट्स नहीं लिखेंगे. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? ठीक है, चलो कोई बात नहीं ना. तो मेंशन दैट वट एवर यू आर राइटिंग द आर्टिकल, मेंशन वट एवर इट इज डीलिंग विथ. हाँ, अरे ये एक तो ना इतना बिल्कुल पर्सनल नहीं होना. एक बात बताती हूं, बहुत हिम्मत चाहिए मेंस लिखने के बाद ओपन सेशन में बैठने की. मैं होती तो कभी नहीं बैठती क्योंकि आधा तो कॉन्फिडेंस वहीं डगमगा जाता है. एंड फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल ऐसा नहीं है कि हम जो बता रहे हैं दैट इज द अल्टीमेट ट्रूथ. हम भी ह्यूमन है, हम भी कभी एस्पिरेंट रहे थे जो अपने इंडिकेशन से हमारा सिलेक्शन नहीं हुआ. सो इट्स ओके, बिग डील. बट एनीवेज, this is our understanding. So if you have written, it's not possible for you to write all the points, but it's my duty to tell maximum points. It depends on you. If you've written 5 points, more than enough. Is that very clear? तो ऐसे घबराना नहीं, मार्क्स बहुत अच्छे आएंगे, पेपर आसान था. ठीक है, चलो जल्दी से करो. I have a next class also. With a brief background of quality of urban life in India, introduce the objective and strategy of Smart City program. 4 plus 8.5 clearly. So the first part of the question says, with a brief background of quality of urban life in India, how have you attempt or how do you intend to attempt this question? Read the question. ये easy question है. एक बार read करो इसे. Growth. Urban sprawl? Huh? 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 Okay. Can I very briefly start the question saying that currently 31% of the population is residing in urban India with 60%, or to be very precise, 63% contribution to GDP, which projects cities to be the vehicle of economic development. However, in current scenario, there exists a paradox in Indian society where this process of urbanization, which prima facie is such a positive concept, is not reaping the desired result. And it has impacted the quality of urban life on these criterias. The first is housing, that is slum proliferation. The second is overcrowding and depersonalization. आज किसी को कोई मतलब नहीं होता पड़ोसी के साथ क्या हो रहा है. That is also declining the quality of urban life. That cohesion, that community feeling is completely washed out or diluted. Third is the problem of transport, which is severely impacting the quality of urban life. Water supply, drainage, shortage of electricity, environment, and socio-cultural factor. Within, so, Hanji. Oh, sorry, sanitation, sorry. It is very important. It's not also important, it's very important. Healthcare and sanitation. Somebody saying something? So can we say quality of urban life on these criteria very briefly, and then you can talk about the smart city mission to address all of these aspects. Exactly. What is smart city program? The basic objective of smart city program is core infrastructure, decent quality of life to all the citizens, clean and sustainable environment, and application of smart solutions. This answer has three parts. The first part, declining quality of urban life, that you will be addressing from these perspectives. The second is the objective of smart city program. It has fourfold objective. The first is core infrastructure. Second is decent quality of life. Third is clean and sustainable environment. And fourth is application of smart solutions. This is what is the objective of the smart city program. And the third part of your answer is the strategy to implement, and that is fourfold again. First is retrofitting. Second is redevelopment. Third is greenfield development. And fourth is pan-city development. Is that clear? I'll explain. Retrofitting, that's the strategy. How do you intend to implement? Retrofitting, redevelopment, greenfield development, and fourth is pan-city development. Is that clear? Retrofitting का मतलब होता है that already existing एक urban space है. You would not make any major changes to it, but already existing space को you will improve to certain extent so that it becomes livable. That is retrofitting. What do you mean by redevelopment? Already there exists a structure. You will remove this structure and you will reconstruct it again. Third is greenfield. Matlab, there exists no structure. You are starting from a scratch. And fourth is pan-city development. Matlab, making use of information, communication and technology and data. You will improve the accessibility of resources. मतलब टेक्नोलॉजी को यूज करके, डेटा को यूज करके जितनी भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चरल सर्विसेज हैं हम उनको इंप्रूव करेंगे. फॉर एग्जाम्पल बेटर वाटर मैनेजमेंट, better transport management, better health care, better sanitation, drainage, solid waste management, everything. So it's a very, very simple and a direct question. जो आप चाहो तो जो मिनिस्ट्री की वेबसाइट होती है ना स्मार्ट सिटी प्रोग्राम की, वहां पे भी जाके सर्च करोगे, इसी में आता है. पहला चैलेंज ऑफ अर्बनाइजेशन, second is the objective of smart city, third is the strategy, fourth is the implementation, that is finance, and fifth is the role of special purpose vehicle. So ऐसा कुछ UPSC ने नहीं पूछा जो ना पता हो. That's a direct and the most simple question which you can ever get. Is that very clear? Any doubt? Can I move ahead to the last question? What is the basis of regionalism? Is it that unequal distribution of benefits of the development on regional basis eventually promotes regionalism? Substantiate your answer. It has two parts to it. In fact, I would say three parts to it. First, what is the basis of regionalism? Secondly, is it the unequal regional development which is leading to regionalism? And third, examples. Is that very clear? So what is the basis of regionalism? Son of soil or caste. Okay, good enough. Geography, language, relative deprivation, relative deprivation. Okay, I'll take this question, I'll take 5 minutes of yours, but we'll do this discussion properly, as in thoda sa elaborate, because this question is also linked to the first question of linguistic aspect. I'll tell you one technique. You will never go wrong if there is ever any question. See, every individual has two parts which is very important to their existence. One is culture and other is livelihood. Clear hai? When any of these dimensions get impacted by any force, either your culture is getting dominated or your livelihood is being deprived or declined, then there is a feeling of deprivation. There is a feeling of only deprivation. ठीक है? But if there exists any class or political party or any other institution which makes you realize about this deprivation, it results into you will never go wrong. There is culture, linguistic reorganization, caste-based reorganization, religious orientation, everything is there. Your history, your geography, everything is there. But at the end of it, it is livelihood opportunities. And there has to be someone, some external force to make subjective realization of the objective reality. क्योंकि आप देखो बहुत सारे ऐसे एरियाज हैं जहां पे अनइक्वल डेवलपमेंट एग्जिस्ट कर रहा है. इनफैक्ट हर जगह करेगा. इंडिया इज टू बिग एंड टू डाइवर्स. इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल दैट एवरीवन इज इक्वली डेवलप्ड, बट यू विल नॉट फाइंड द सेंटिमेंट्स ऑफ रीजनलिज्म ग्रोइंग एवरीवेयर. Feeling of regionalism is not uniform. There are certain pockets in India where this feeling of regionalism is very prominent, and the reason is there has to be an external force which makes subjective realization of the objective reality. Then there exists a feeling of relative deprivation. आपका पुअर होना इतना मुश्किल नहीं होता है जितना relatively पुअर होना मुश्किल होता है. अभी सबको बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है यहां बैठे हुए. जब अगले साल इनमें से किसी का सिलेक्शन हो जाएगा ना, तब फीलिंग ऑफ रिलेटिव डेप्रिवेशन क्रॉप इन करती है. नहीं, फैक्ट है. व्हेन एवरीवन इज इक्वल देन यू फील ना, चलो साथ में पढ़ते हैं, सब करते हैं. किसी एक का भी सिलेक्शन हो जाए, मतलब बात करने का मन ही नहीं करता कि मतलब छोड़ो, लेट इट बी. दैट इज फीलिंग ऑफ रिलेटिव डेप्रिवेशन. उसके बाद ये रिजर्वेशन, किसी रैंक 1 के ऊपर क्वेश्चन उठाना, ये सारी चीजें शुरू हो जाती हैं क्योंकि तब आपको रिलेटिव डेप्रिवेशन हो रहा है. जब फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट होता है ना, वेरी प्रोएक्टिव, वेरी पॉजिटिव, सो व्हाट, शी हैज अ रिजर्व कैटेगरी, शी डिजर्व टू क्लियर द एग्जाम. 2 अटेम्प्ट होने दो, तीसरे अटेम्प्ट में बोलोगे रिजर्वेशन नहीं होता ना तो मेरा भी हो जाता. दैट इज रिलेटिव डेप्रिवेशन. एंड देयर हैज टू बी समवन टू मेक यू रियलाइज. तो वो है ना इतनी सरकार हमारी ऑपोजिशन पार्टी, इसके लिए रिजर्वेशन, जाट रिजर्वेशन, ये मराठा रिजर्वेशन, पट्टीदार रिजर्वेशन. So they are there, subjective realization of objective reality leading to regionalism. So what is the basis of regionalism? There can be different bases. First, historical. Just jot down the points so that later you can refer to them. First is the historical basis, जहां पे आप अपने ट्रेडिशन को सोर्स बनाते हो. जैसे डीएमके ने डिमांड की थी द्रविडिस्तान. एक डिमांड आई थी ना, द्रविड़ा नाडु, द्रविडिस्तान, वन कास्ट फॉर ऑल. Because that was, they were relating to their history, that the Dravidans are the original inhabitants and Aryans are the invaders. So by making use of the history, myth, folklore, they were trying to demand or justify their demand for regionalism. Is that very clear? Okay. Second is geographical factors. After the integration of princely states, people still continue to nurse their loyalties to the older units. So that is the geographical factor. Third is language, linguistic reorganization. Fourth is caste. Fifth is religion. But एक बात याद रखना, caste and religion individually are not a very significant factor for reorganization. It has to be presented in the garb of linguistic reorganization. Is that very clear? Religion, you can take example of Punjab and Haryana. Caste, you can take example of Tamil Nadu and Andhra. Is that very clear? Okay. Then it is economic. And last is the political and administrative reasons. Economic and the political and administrative reasons. एक बात हमेशा याद रखना, politics never leads to regionalism, but politics definitely accentuates regionalism. क्योंकि ये relative deprivation के लिए deprivation का होना जरूरी है. तो deprivation जहां जहां होगा, politics बस उसको use करेगा to fan the sentiments of the deprived society. So regionalism is not politics does not lead to regionalism, but it definitely promotes and pertains or persists regionalism in the society. Is that very clear? And the most important thing is that every point is correct, but everything boils down to so it is the lack of equal regional development which is the main source of regionalism or cause of regionalism in India. लिंक कर लो कहीं से भी, लिंग्विस्टिक रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन भी उठा लो. लैंग्वेज को क्यों मुद्दा बनाया था, ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज को क्यों मुद्दा उठाया था, जॉब्स, एजुकेशन इन द हायर इंस्टीट्यूशन. करोगे क्या जॉब और एजुकेशन का, पैसे ही तो कमाने हैं ना. तो दैट इज इकोनॉमी एट द एंड ऑफ इट. व्हाट इज ऑल अबाउट ये रिलीजियस डिमांड्स जो पंजाब में आई थी. अरे खालिस्तान तो बाद की डिमांड है, पहले तो पंजाबी स्टेट की डिमांड करी थी ना. क्यों करी थी, कोई रिच स्टेट वगैरह नहीं था. अकाली दल पहले इलेक्शन में सीट्स नहीं ला पाया था, तो अकाली दल को चाहिए थी सीट्स. तो उन्हें लगा कि एक सिख लेड स्टेट बन जाएगा, देन अकाली दल विल कम टू द पॉलिटिकल पावर. एंड व्हाई डू यू वांट पॉलिटिकल पावर, बात खत्म. एवरीथिंग बॉइल्स डाउन. देन जितना भी ये नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन हुआ था 70s में, क्यों हुआ था, क्योंकि ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज एक्ट पास कर दिया था असम ने 1961 में, where Assamese was made the official language. तो जितने भी हिल ट्राइबल एरियाज थे उनको फियर था that their livelihood and culture is getting dominated, and that is why that was the time when Mizo National Front या फिर Nagaland councils were emerging, and that led to the split or reorganization of northeastern states. Most importantly 2000 Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, more lately Telangana. Everything boils down to unequal regional development, which is economic in nature. So economic deprivation is the crux of regional politics. And finally, the current demands, Saurashtra, Vidarbha, Bodoland. Bodoland को बोलते सब ethnic region, लेकिन ethnicity से ज़्यादा या somewhere deep down the line it is related to the economy. Because people are reduced to minority in their own region. They do not have access to better education and job opportunities. As a result, everything boils down to economic criteria. And this is how you have to give your reasons as well as substantiate the answer. Is that very clear? There are multiple factors, but economy is the crux of regional politics. ना ये बाद में लिखोगे, पहले establish तो करो. हाँ. Okay, in this question, start with the definition of regionalism. Regionalism is defined as a phenomena where an individual's political loyalties become more focused towards a region as against the nation at large. Second, regionalism is rooted in India's diversity, vis-a-vis caste, culture, language, religion. When all these factors gets geographically concentrated, along with the feeling of relative deprivation, it results into regionalism. Third, the basis of regionalism: historical, geographical, language, culture, caste, economy, and political and administrative failure. And finally, the next part, that economy is the crux of regional politics, and this you will establish by either giving this argument along with the substantiation. चाहे वो तेलंगाना हो, चाहे वो छत्तीसगढ़ हो, झारखंड हो, सौराष्ट्र की डिमांड हो, विदर्भ की डिमांड हो. Is that very clear for all of you? One thing, please remember, I come to an end to this discussion, but two जो बहुत ध्यान से सुनना. Society has the very limited syllabus. Every year you will get minimum 5 to 6 questions. It is very easy to score in society. Please do not take this section to be very lightly. The question appears to be very different prima facie, but when you get down to answer, it is altogether different. And whenever you score, it is altogether a different story. And there is a myth that sociology people score really well. So for you, it's a oversimplified or overconfidence that people have, because you really don't know how to present your content in 1.5 pages. Learn the art of answer writing. Practice, make diagrams. Make that flow charts while you are preparing the framework. This will ease your work in writing the final answer. Is that very clear? There, absolutely there can be. You have to just identify what is the issue. एक बस last चीज बता देती हूँ. That suppose करो there is any social issue. You have to prepare a short note. Causes of that issue, the present status of that issue, the government provisions that you have. Within government provisions, constitutional, statutory, judicial pronouncements, and international conventions. फिर government provisions, implication. Implications के बाद lacuna, and finally way forward. Prepare your notes like this, you will never ever falter. Paper 2 में पूछा जाए तो भी लिख दोगे, सोसाइटी में पूछा जाए तो भी लिख दोगे, और अगर implications prepare करे हैं तो इकोनॉमी का पेपर भी attempt हो जाएगा. Prepare yourself in these dimensions. Causes of the issue, the present status, that is the statistical evidences. Third is the government provisions, constitutional provision, statutory provision, judicial pronouncements, and international conventions. What are the implications of that social issue? And what are the lacunas in the government provisions, and what needs to be done? This is the least that you can do for a good marks in UPSC. Is that very clear to all of you? There is a video on YouTube where I have dealt with how to prepare for society. You guys get time, do watch that video, because due to shortage of time, I cannot take that in detail. Is that very clear? Just look for it. In case you have any doubt or something, this is my email ID. Guys, wish you all the very best, and I hope to see you in the next year's open session where all of you will raise hand and said that you've written 2017 mains. Wish you all the very best, guys. Have a good day.